Hey, so are you feeling lost if you're in your personal work or you have your own business or you work for somebody else too, or you're in a ministry? Are you feeling like you're just really not sure where you're headed, where you're going? What your purpose is, what direction am I doing with my what am I doing with my life? A lot of people go through that. A lot of people, as they're trying to do the work that they're doing, and they feel like they have a good life overall. They take a look and they feel blessed by God, but there's something nagging at you. There's something feeling like you're missing something. You're not living up to your potential. You're feeling like there's something disconnected, and or you feel like you're just going through the routine, right? You if you're a churchman and you just go to go to church on Sunday, and you come home and you go to study, and you're going through the motions, right? Or if you're a pastor or an elder, you feel like you're something similar like that. You're showing up every week, and it's really hard, and there's a lot going on, but you're starting to feel like, where are we going? Where's this headed? Or maybe you're in a ministry too, and you're in part of a ministry, you're helping lead a part of a ministry, and you're trying to figure out, well, what direction should we really be going? Like, what is the point of all this, right? What's the point? I think a lot of people could be like that at work or in ministry, maybe in all of life. What's the point? And a lot of us have that. When that happens, we start to ask good questions oftentimes, like, God, what am I missing? What's going on? What do I need to remember? And that's the right question, because honestly, it's in these times of our lives when that happens that's really what we need to start doing. We need to start remembering what God has done in our lives and what God is doing, and reflect on that. And so it's kind of cool, because all of life typically is a story. It's something that obviously I think I care very deeply about, because I named my business Storyscape Design. That stories are really important to me, and to understand them helps me understand where I'm at in the journey, right, of the story. You think about a movie and a character, and where is the character at in their journey? There are many times in Lord of the Rings where Frodo got really discouraged about where he was in his journey to take the ring to Mordor and destroy it, and felt like he couldn't go on, right? And so our lives are stories. God is actually telling stories with our lives. And we don't always see that. We just live day to day. And sometimes we feel like our stories aren't even that exciting. It's like, I feel discouraged, but I'm not like, it's nothing significantly dramatic has happened right now in my life beyond maybe what other people go through. But oftentimes it's in these normal moments that's actually where great stories are found, where God is actually doing the work in the normal stuff that actually isn't just normal, that there's more that God is actually doing in our lives than maybe what meets the eye. And so it's about taking a moment and reflecting back on that journey, and then bringing that insight into what we're doing, whether that's what we're doing at church, what we're doing with our families, what we're doing at work. That's what we need to start doing. And so I wanted to encourage you today, if you're one of those people, if you're in this state right now where you feel discouraged, you feel kind of lost, you're not sure where to go, you feel like you're a little like not getting traction, you're stuck, I want to encourage you today, and I want to share some things with you, because you're living a story right now, and God is actually telling something amazing in the story that you're living. And I want to share this with you. The point of a story is actually the point, right? It's the direction you're headed. And so the question we should be asking ourselves is, okay, well, what direction am I headed? Well, oftentimes we don't really think about that. We're just one foot in front of the other, right? I mean, we know kind of what's on our calendars, for Thursday or something like that, but we don't think much further than that. What's our goals? Do you have goals? What's our ultimate purpose for the workplace, the business that you run, or you participate in working in, or the ministries you're doing, or your family? What's the goals that you have? Because ultimately our stories are leading a direction. And it's really interesting to see when you start to take a look back where your stories are going. But the thing is, you have to take some time to do that. You have to take some time to review, to back up a little bit, and then explore what God has been doing in your life. When we do that, there's something really cool that actually happens. You know, the heart of our plans that we're trying to do, if we're trying to just push throughout the day, we've got our plans, we've got our things we need to accomplish, and we try to go towards them, and we try to push towards them. But God also is doing something in our lives. So if we can think through, oh, okay, I know what I want to get accomplished this week, but what's God accomplishing? What has God been doing in my life? What is it? Am I really living the life that God wants me to live? I don't know. It's possible, actually, for us to know how God is leading. Now, there might be surprises because all of us have, there's always a new turn or a curveball that happens in life, but it is possible to know the trajectory of what God is doing in our life, but we have to know how to explore that. And oftentimes, if we don't explore that, there's some things that happen. Evil happens in our lives, and when evil happens to us, as happened in Joseph's story here in Genesis 50, if we didn't have the proper vision when crap happens to us, we start to get really discouraged. And we start to understand why. And of course, Joseph's story is an amazing story in this regard. He stayed, for the most part, on mission. I mean, he probably had his moments, in prison, and having been sold into slavery by his brothers. He had his moments. But I mean, ultimately, the scripture narrative tells us that he saw that something was happening, that God was doing great work, even through his dreams that he was interpreting of the Pharaoh's dreams and the cupbearer's dreams and other dreams, right? So he says this ultimately to his brothers when he is now second in command to Egypt for Pharaoh. He says, "As for you, you meant this for evil, but God meant it for good, to bring about many people who should be kept alive as they are today." God is accomplishing great things. And when bad things happen to us, if we're not in the right mindset, if we've not taken a minute to plan out, to understand the journey God has brought us through, it's going to become a lot harder for us to keep going. We're going to keep struggling with these feelings. And so there's a really good quote that I like from Dr. Jordan Peterson, who says, "What you most need to find is found where you least want to look." What you most need to find is found where you least want to look. And so oftentimes to look back into our story means we have to think about and look at things that we really don't want to think and revisit. There are parts of our souls, our stories, that are very dark for some of us and difficult for everybody. And so sometimes the journey to look back, to see what God is doing, and to start to ask some questions about what God's been trying to teach me over my life, that's a hard thing to do. And obviously, it can take a long time to work through some of these things. But the more we do, the more we kind of deliberately go through our own story and see those moments, revisit those moments, even the dark, deep, dark moments, and talk about with God and you and maybe another person who can help you through this, whether you're a pastor or a counselor, that can help you process through this. What is God doing that can help you understand what God did in your life to expose you to these hardships, and how has that transformed you? Because you're stronger from where you were, even if it was something that maybe you feel like you don't fully have a grasp on. You don't want to really go there yet. God's actually built something in you. And it's a question of, are we willing to continue the work that God is doing, work with God to work on ourselves so that we can ultimately help other people? As we see here in Joseph's story, it says, you meant this for evil. People meant things that happened to us for evil. And it could be just the circumstances in life. Sometimes stuff happens to you, right? But God's working it out for good to bring about for other people's benefit. See that right there? To bring about the many people, for Joseph should be kept alive as they are today. God is working all things out for our good and for the good of other people. And the stories, the difficulties he's bringing us through, or he's brought us through, if we haven't fully processed them, will be harder for us to be able to then actually be as effective for Christ, whether at work, at family, at home, or even at our churches, if we haven't really worked through those things. And so what you most need to find is where you least want to look. And here's another good quote: until you make the unconscious conscious, the things that you've not really processed, those things are going to direct your life unconsciously. You're not going to know that they're influencing you, but they are. And then you'll call whatever happens to you just a matter of fate. It's just, I guess it was supposed to happen. And so what we want to do is take a look back, find those things that God has worked in our lives, brought difficulty in our lives in, how God has literally made this an opportunity for us to be used by him, and bring that into our families, our workplaces, and our ministries, right? And so there's a way to do this deliberately. If you are in leadership of some sort, whether you are a leader of your family, right? That's one. Number two, if you are a leader in your church in some regard, you help run a ministry, or you are in charge of the church, or you are in some form of leadership at work. God is wanting to do a work in you to continue to impact the people that he's already got you serving, but you need to do some journeying through the story that God's brought you through so you can come away with the gold that he wants you to be able to share with other people, right? And so that means you have to cultivate a story. You have to know the story God's leading you through. And so that story means that it's like you've been climbing a mountain, right? Whatever it is, it's been difficult. It's always an uphill journey. And so God is doing a work, and it's uphill. And sometimes it's not so steep. Sometimes it's really steep, right? And you're climbing a lot of different hills or mountains in the course of your life. And so there's a pathway that you end up journeying, right? Every step leaves a footprint. So sometimes the things that you've been able to help, that you've been going through, can help you literally blaze a trail for the next person behind you to see where you stepped. And that could be from a mistake or not. You can see the benefit, the direction you've gone. That's a good pathway this direction, up this side. But that way looks like that was a much harder journey. So I'm going to go this way, right? So our paths that we've blazed in our lives, they're pointing in a direction for other people to follow. And if we've not done our work at actually reflecting back on this journey, it's going to be hard for other people coming up behind us, because they might end up going the same direction we went because they're following our example. And you realize now, looking back at where you were, I shouldn't have gone that way. I should have actually taken this route, right? So this is what reflecting back on your story allows you to do. It allows you to go, oh, people have seen my life. People are still learning about my life through my engagement with people. What is God actually wanting me to do to help other people who are coming up after me in the directions I'm in? And that's at work, that's at home, And so of course that applies to your kids, that applies to the people that you work with around, whether you're working as a position of leadership or even as a peer. And it applies, of course, in the ministries you run at church. And so what is the story? We need to start getting into that. And then when you get into the story, when you start to kind of just take one story at a time that God's led you through and the difficulties he's led you through, you start to get a picture. And if you're strategic about that picture, you can develop what I call a storyscape. All right, that's why I call it Storyscape Design, my business. You can develop literally a map that not only helps yourself navigate, oh, I see, when I hit these types of trials, here's the path I took, and here's the path I should take, right? But what it also helps you do is remind yourself of the things that you want to do, and also help encourage other people, like I said, who are coming up behind you, the route that they should consider at least. Maybe you don't have to, you tell them they have to follow the same route, but here's something I'd consider. And you can be strategic about it. And here's how you would be able to construct a storyscape, is what I'm talking about, from your story. You take note of the things that caused you pain, and then how did you start to learn from that? How did you start to fix that problem, that pain, right? Whatever it is. And how do you journey in that process towards a better purpose? And this happens especially in the workplace, especially in other places where you're in charge or in some position of influence over other people. This is so helpful, because then you can use the stories that you've experienced of pain to help people pursue a better purpose. The purpose that you've now realized you got on the other side of the thing. This would have been so much easier, right? And so what has God brought you through? What is the pain that you've experienced? And then how can you pursue? What have you decided? This is what I'm going to do instead. So in a workplace environment, it would be something like, man, when I had this manager and he had us do X, Y, and Z, and this was just an absolute nightmare. And I couldn't believe it. And everybody else was like this. And we tried to do this and it didn't work out. And it was just terrible, right? So now that I'm in charge, I'm not doing that ever again, right? That's pain. And now a new renewed purpose. Why you're pursuing what you're pursuing. And you'd be surprised. So I had one of my work experiences was very interesting. I came in and things were very different with this one particular workplace. And it really confused me. And then some things were, where I wasn't on board with what they wanted me to do. And I was really confused. And so it took me a full year before I started to go, okay, there seems to be a strategy here that I'm just trying to figure out what the strategy is. It's really difficult to understand. And then my last year working at that place, my boss was in a conversation with me. We were talking about other things, and she casually mentioned a story from her, because now she's more relaxed, more comfortable with me because I've been there for a few years. She mentioned the story of how did she end up making all these procedures and plans and how we did things in the office. And I'm like, and the reason was she had had an insane, painful experience happen to her and everybody else at the workplace. And to prevent all of that, they put in all of these new procedures. And honestly, after I heard the whole picture, all of them made sense. It all clicked. I'm like, oh my goodness, if she had just told me that my first week, really recited the whole story, here's what happened there, and we did this, and then that's why we put this in place, right? Pain and purpose. Oh my goodness, would that have helped me as a new employee get on board immediately with what's going on, right? That's the same thing in anything. If we're in a leadership position, what has God brought you through? And explain it. And one other thing, it's very easy to do, especially sometimes with guys. We tend to be real short about everything. We don't like the long stories. Sometimes if you just say, I already did that, it sucked, don't do it, that's not enough. You need to actually give the journey. Here's what happened. Here's why it did what it did, which means you have to take time to recall those information. Again, a lot of guys are on to the next thing. We're very task oriented. Okay. But you want to help people get on board. You need to be a good storyteller, and not in the negative form of that, in a good way. You need to be good at explaining what happened, why it happened, how it happened, what that meant for everybody else, and then, okay, here's what we needed to do and why. And here's, we put this part in place here at this time, and then we put this part in place and this part, and now we're here, and this is why we're doing what we're doing. This is key to understanding that, right? Now, sometimes, again, very important for leaders, sometimes it may be helpful for you in the moment to reflect on, oh, is the reality on the ground that you're experiencing the same as when you were back when these problems existed? Because sometimes things change. And if the problems aren't a one-to-one match, sometimes there might be an adjustment that someone's asking you to make that actually might be helpful. Even if you've reflected on the painful moment in the past, it might be still helpful for you to reflect, oh, there's a new pain that's happening right now versus in the past. So how are you going to respond to that new pain? Someone's probably telling you of that new pain that's happening. Okay, so this is another point in the journey that you have to start to reflect on what direction you're going. And again, if you've already done this mapping out of your past experience, it's going to become so helpful for you to pull out these stories to help people understand and to compass yourself, right? So that's what I call a storyscape, and it's such an important process. And this is what I would like to extend to you. I would like to help you think through at least some part of your journey. Maybe one of the mountains you've had to climb, maybe in just one of the spheres. Maybe it could be in a workplace situation, in your work leadership. It could be in the ministry you're doing for the Lord, right, in a formal ministry. Or it could be at your home, in your family, right? These are ways that are going to help you map these out. And I've been studying story for a long time, and for literally over 10 years of formal study in these types of things. And you'd be surprised. It's amazing because I also studied history, and history, when you study history, it's the same thing. It's actually learning how people have painful things happen to them, and then what did they choose for the solution to that, all throughout history. So that was my formal training, was in history education and communication education. And then in the business world, I started to realize just how much these things mapped onto each other. And especially in the therapeutic context, they all map onto each other. We're helping people change is what an educator does, and reflecting on our past and on the past of other people, of different people's pain and the purpose they started to pursue, helps us to understand ourselves. Otherwise, you repeat the same mistakes, right? That's what history is. So how is the journey God is bringing you through? And that also allows you, once you've kind of got that full picture of journey, there's a way for you to be able to kind of bottle that up so that you can explain that better to other people in your companies or in your ministries and even in your families. And that's where you end up developing, in a formal sense of what you're doing in leadership, a vision, your mission statement, and values. Well, I already have those. They're fine. Okay. When you've reflected already on your story, your pain points, and the purpose, and how you've led people through that, it transforms what you typically would see in these areas. Because a lot of times when you're making these statements, you're making them on a very surface, okay, here's what we do, here's how that works, here's where we're going, here's how that works. And we haven't really fully connected the story that God has told us in our telling through our lives, and the pain and purpose you've pursued, and infuse that into how you explain what you do in a formal sense of leadership. And so we will revisit these specifically for the purpose of being more clear in how you're going to lead people in a formal way, whether that's in and it's technically formal to some degree, family leadership, company leadership, in business workplace, or in a ministry context, right? So formalizing these first for yourself, right? So that you understand the stories God's brought you through, and then how that echoes into the formal leadership that you have in the way you lead. So here's what I do professionally. So this is something that I can do for you if you would like to help you in one of these spheres: your family, your church, your ministry, or your ministry leadership, and or your leadership of your companies. So I have a process by which I kind of go through this. We start with your brand story, we go to your storyscape, and then if you're going to actually think about going beyond that, now you have to start thinking about the people that you serve, right? And when you're creating content as well, it's another way to disciple the people that you're leading is by creating media, creating training materials, if you will, to help the people you're leading, right? So that's what that first you have to know the people you want to train, right? Because it really helps to understand who they are, what their background is, what their story is, what their interests are, so that you can help compass people from your story to their story, right? And then that allows you to come up with core messaging as a leader of one of these spheres, and the media strategy, meaning the way you discipleship tools you create to facilitate that, right? Now that can happen at your workplace if you wanted to do this. It can help happen in your formal ministry, and this can also be done at the home, even though it's kind of worded a little more toward formal leadership roles. And so if this is something that you're interested in exploring, I would encourage you to reach out. And if you just wanted to start with your brand story, which is basically the way you're formally leading people, right? How are you formally leading people? How are you influencing people? That's all a brand is. A brand is how you are publicly portraying what it is that you're trying to lead people to. You're already doing that, even if you don't want to use that word. So that's the formal word that we're using in formal contexts, right? So if this is something you're interested in pursuing, reach out to me, take a look at that. And then we can actually start to look at the discipleship tools that you're going to use, whether that's in your workplace, whether that's in your ministry, and even in your home, homeschooling, home educating, just in general leadership, is thinking about the formal media tools that you can start to build that will help disciple the people that you have impact over, and try to talk about the story that God's calling you to impact people with, right? There are a lot of different ways you can write an autobiography, but there are a lot of other options for you today besides just writing an autobiography. If you've got an amazing backstory where God's led you through a lot, but you have to know how to leverage those media tools. And so that would be something, if you'd like to explore that, you can DM me. We can talk through any one of these types of things that would help you in a formal leadership way to help impact the people that you want, get yourself connected to the core of what God is already doing in your life. And let me tell you, the moment you drop in to this story that God's got you in, right? What is the story that God's telling you? All this anxiety, all this fear, all this discouragement, all this not sure where we're going clicks pretty fast. It's just incredible when you see what God has been doing in your life, the pain he's brought you through, and the purpose he's calling you to, purposes, right? It is incredible just how that impacts everything that you do. And so I highly encourage you to reach out to me if you're in a formal leadership position and you would like to take a first step into, okay, I want to explore my brand story, or my story, my leadership story that God's calling me to be able to lead. And I would love to maybe create this storyscape map you're talking about that helps me kind of plot out, here's the things I've gone through that I don't want to go through again, and here's the things I'm going through now because I want to, right? Pain and purpose. That's the chart you're wanting to make. And that just pretty much defines how you live what you do, why you talk about the things you do, right? And then that becomes so helpful when you're talking about creating content, leadership content that helps the people in which you lead know how to orient them, right? And it's just an incredible way to help with that. So definitely reach out if you're interested. I would be happy to. You can visit my website. Right now it's mostly oriented towards getting you into the first part of what's called a funnel, which is basically just how you impact people. Thinking of a funnel almost like a kind of a bullhorn type thing. The base of the funnel is just where you can drive people to, and it's also where you can speak from, right? So websites are really helpful, but ultimately we're going to get all the way up into how you can use social media, which is what everyone, if you're going to talk about what type of media is someone spending more time on than any other type of media, they're going to be on social media. So your people are being influenced and discipled by someone, and the points of other people's stories are leading them in different directions. And so the question is, are you going to want to help at least be another person in their feed that can point them to a direction that you feel like might be helpful for them, right? Might be something that God has brought you through that you'd like to share with other people, what those things are, right? And that can help you reinforce your social relationships and your formal relationships in a workplace. You can actually start to do this. So let's have a conversation. Reach out to me, DM, and you can visit my website if you'd like to learn more about how I start with that, storyscapedesign.com. But yeah, DM me if you're interested, and we can have a conversation. Okay, thanks a lot.